The wedding hall glowed with warm golden lights, chandeliers sparkling above as the music filled every corner. Laughter and chatter rose from every table, and couples walked hand in hand, stopping now and then to greet old friends. Emma sat at a table near the edge of the room, her dress neat and elegant, her smile polite but fragile. The chair beside her was empty, and the emptiness seemed louder than the music. She traced her finger along the rim of her glass, trying to look occupied. But deep down she knew she was alone. The night was supposed to be joyful, a celebration of love and togetherness. For Emma, it only made her heart heavier. Just 6 months earlier she had pictured this evening differently. She had imagined walking in with Michael, her boyfriend of 3 years, laughing at inside jokes, sharing stolen glances during the speeches. But Michael had ended things abruptly, and Emma was left carrying an invitation she didn't want to use. Still, she couldn't say no to the bride, her childhood friend. So she came, promising herself she would smile and endure it. Everywhere she looked, couples moved in harmony. One pair leaned close, whispering to each other as though no one else existed. Another couple stood on the dance floor, hands clasped tightly, swaying to the rhythm of a romantic ballad. Each moment seemed to remind Emma of what she had lost, of how far away love now felt. She tried not to let it show, but her chest ached with every laugh that wasn't hers, every glance that wasn't meant for her. Her table had once been full of chatter. Friends had stopped by to say hello, but soon they drifted away to join the dance floor or reunite with old acquaintances. One by one, they left until Emma sat alone. The conversations around her blurred into background noise, a constant reminder of how out of place she was. She tried to convince herself it didn't matter, that she was strong enough to sit quietly until it was time to leave. Still, a small voice inside her whispered that she didn't belong. She reached for her glass, pretending to take another sip just to keep her hands busy. That was when it happened. A shadow moved across her table and she looked up, startled. A man stood there, tall and slightly out of breath, as if he had rushed over. He leaned down quickly, his voice low but clear, carrying urgency she didn't expect. "Act like you're with me." Emma froze, her heart skipping a beat. The words didn't make sense. She blinked at him, unsure if she had heard correctly. He didn't wait for her response. He slipped into the empty chair beside her, his shoulders straight, his expression calm, though his eyes carried a flicker of nervousness. Emma's mind spun. Who was he? Why would a stranger sit at her table, asking her to pretend something so strange? She should have told him to leave, to explain himself properly. Instead, she found herself speechless, caught between confusion and curiosity. The man glanced over his shoulder, as if checking whether someone had followed him. Then he leaned slightly closer to her, lowering his voice again. "Please, just for a moment. I promise I'll explain." Emma's pulse quickened. Her first instinct was to stand up and walk away, but something stopped her. Maybe it was the urgency in his tone, or the way his expression softened when their eyes met. For reasons she couldn't explain, she didn't push him away. She nodded, barely noticeable, but enough for him to see. In that instant, the energy around her shifted. What had been an empty chair, a quiet corner of the room, was suddenly alive with mystery. Emma didn't understand who he was or what he wanted, but her loneliness was no longer the loudest thing in the room. And deep down, though she wouldn't admit it yet, a part of her felt something she hadn't felt all night: curiosity, maybe even a spark of excitement. The stranger smiled faintly, almost in relief, before turning his attention to the crowd approaching their table. Emma sat still, her thoughts racing, realizing that the night she thought would be ordinary had just taken a turn she could never have expected. Emma's heart pounded as the man sat beside her, his calm expression at odds with the whirlwind inside her chest. She leaned slightly toward him, whispering, "Excuse me? Do I know you?" Her voice trembled with a mix of caution and curiosity. The man gave a quick, nervous smile, his eyes darting back to the group of relatives approaching their table. "No, you don't," he admitted softly. "But please just pretend we're together. I'll explain everything in a second." Emma wanted to protest, to demand answers. But the group was already close, their smiles wide, their voices cheerful. The man straightened in his chair, his hand brushing close to hers on the table as if they were an established couple. He greeted them with practiced ease, calling one woman Aunt Clara and shaking hands with a middle-aged man who clapped him on the shoulder. Emma followed his lead, her lips curling into a polite smile, though her mind raced. The relatives looked at her with warmth, asking polite questions and remarking how nice it was to see him finally bring someone. Emma's cheeks flushed, but she managed small answers, nodding along as though this really were her place. The group didn't linger long. After a few pleasantries, they moved on, leaving behind a trail of satisfied smiles. As soon as they were gone, Emma exhaled, setting her glass down with a soft clink. She turned to the stranger, her eyes narrowing. "Okay? What was that?" The man rubbed the back of his neck, looking both sheepish and relieved. "I'm Daniel," he said quickly, "and I owe you an explanation." Emma crossed her arms, waiting. "My family." He paused, glancing around before continuing. "They've been on my case for months about settling down. Every family event turns into the same lecture. Why am I still single? When will I bring someone home? Why don't I try harder? Tonight, it got worse. They were expecting me to show up with someone, and I just panicked. Then I saw you, sitting alone. You looked kind, and I thought maybe you'd help me for a moment." Emma blinked at him, unsure whether to laugh or be offended. "So, you decided to drag me into your family drama?" Daniel winced. "Yes, and I'm sorry. I know it was selfish. But you saved me just now, and I can't thank you enough." Emma shook her head. But to her own surprise, a laugh escaped her lips. It was soft, unexpected, and genuine. "You're unbelievable," she said, though her tone wasn't harsh. Daniel's shoulders relaxed, his expression warming. "You're right. I shouldn't have done that without asking. But for what it's worth, you were incredible back there. Natural, even." She looked at him carefully. He wasn't smug or arrogant. He seemed sincere, almost embarrassed by his own behavior. There was something disarming about him, something that made her anger soften. Emma leaned back in her chair, her curiosity growing despite herself. "So, what's the plan? Am I supposed to keep pretending all night?" Daniel hesitated, then grinned slightly. "Only if you want to. I don't want to push you, but you'd be saving me from another round of lectures." Emma studied him. A stranger had walked into her evening, turned her loneliness into something unpredictable. And now he was asking her to play along in his story. She should have said no. She should have walked away. But something about him, the honesty in his eyes, the way he admitted his faults, kept her rooted. "All right," she said slowly. "But just for tonight? After that, you're on your own." Daniel's grin widened, relief shining across his face. "Deal." The tension between them shifted, lightened. For the first time all night, Emma didn't feel invisible. Daniel asked her about herself, her work, her hobbies, how she knew the bride. He listened intently, nodding and laughing in all the right places. He wasn't pretending to care. He truly seemed interested. Emma found herself sharing more than she had intended. She told him about her childhood friendship with the bride, about her love of reading, even a little about her job at the local library. She didn't mention Michael, though the ache lingered in the background in return. Daniel told her about his family, how loud and close they were, how exhausting their expectations could be, and how much he loved them anyway. He admitted he wasn't always good at relationships, that maybe his family had a point, but the pressure made it harder, not easier. The more he spoke, the more Emma realized he wasn't just hiding from his relatives, he was hiding from the weight of their expectations. And for reasons she couldn't quite explain, she understood that feeling. As the evening continued, the crowd around them blurred. Emma stopped noticing the couples on the dance floor, or the laughter from nearby tables. She noticed only Daniel, the way his smile reached his eyes, the way he leaned forward when she spoke, the way he made her feel seen. When he excused himself for a moment, Emma sat back, stunned by how quickly the night had changed. She had arrived expecting to endure hours of loneliness, counting down until she could leave. Instead, she was caught in a whirlwind of conversation with a stranger who had barged into her life with an outrageous request. And yet, she wasn't upset. She felt alive, curious, almost hopeful as Daniel returned to the table with 2 glasses of sparkling water. Emma realized something unexpected. This might have started as his act, but it no longer felt like pretending. The music changed, drifting from upbeat to soft and slow, the kind of song that invited couples to the center of the floor. Laughter faded into the rhythm of the melody, and voices softened as people paired off. Hands finding hands, steps moving together. Emma stayed seated, watching the swirl of dresses and suits as though through glass. She told herself she didn't belong in that world anymore. But before she could retreat into the safety of silence, Daniel stood and extended his hand toward her. "Come on," he said, his voice steady but his smile a little uncertain. "If we're pretending, let's do it properly." Emma froze. Dancing meant stepping into the spotlight, into the very thing she had been avoiding all night. It meant opening herself to eyes, questions, and maybe even memories she didn't want to touch. "I don't know," she whispered. Daniel didn't push. He lowered his hand slightly, his gaze searching hers. "Just one dance. No pressure. No one else matters. Just you and me." Something inside her shifted. Maybe it was the way he asked, gentle, patient, without expectation. Maybe it was the truth in his eyes, the way he didn't look past her, but directly at her. Slowly, almost against her will, Emma placed her hand in his. His fingers wrapped around hers, warm and steady. And before she could change her mind, it led her toward the dance floor. The moment they stepped into the center, Emma's pulse quickened. She felt exposed, but Daniel's hand rested lightly on her back, guiding her with quiet assurance. His movements were careful, not perfect, but real. At first, their steps didn't match. She hesitated. He adjusted, and they laughed softly at the missteps. But soon, their rhythm found balance, and the awkwardness melted away. The world around them blurred. The chatter, the clinking glasses, the hundreds of eyes she thought would pierce her, all of it faded. All she saw was Daniel. His gaze didn't leave hers. His smile was not the grin of someone faking a story, but of someone fully present in the moment. Emma felt her walls crack. She hadn't let herself be close to anyone since Michael, hadn't allowed a man's hand to linger at her back or his eyes to hold hers for so long. But with Daniel, it didn't feel forced. It felt natural. Dangerous, maybe, but also alive. The song carried them gently across the floor. Emma's mind screamed at her to be careful. To remember that this was nothing more than a stranger's request and a single night's performance. But her heart betrayed her, leaning into the warmth of his touch, savoring the safety in his arms. For the first time in months, she wasn't thinking about what she had lost. She was thinking about what she might still find as the music slowed toward its final notes. Daniel's expression shifted. The easy charm faded, replaced by something deeper, quieter. He held her a little closer, his voice barely above the music. "Emma," he whispered, "I know this started as pretend. But right now, it doesn't feel like pretending anymore." Her breath caught. The words struck something she wasn't ready to face. She wanted to believe him, to trust that this connection was real. But part of her still carried the weight of heartbreak, the fear of opening her heart only to have it shattered again. She searched his face, desperate for a sign that he meant it. That this wasn't just another act to keep his family satisfied. But before she could respond, the music ended. Applause filled the hall as couples clapped and cheered, breaking the spell that had wrapped around them. Daniel let his hand linger at her waist for a second longer before gently guiding her back toward their table. Neither spoke. Both carried words unsaid, questions unanswered, emotions too heavy to name in that moment. Emma sat down, her chest tight with confusion. She told herself not to fall into this, not to let one dance and a few kind words undo the walls she had built. But when she looked at Daniel, she saw no performance. She saw a man who seemed just as surprised by this connection as she was. Daniel broke the silence first. His voice softer than before. "I didn't plan any of this. I just wanted to get through tonight without another lecture. But sitting with you, talking with you, dancing with you, it feels different. Like I found something I didn't know I was looking for." Emma swallowed hard, her throat tight. She didn't know what to say. She wanted to trust him, but trust had cost her before. Still, deep inside, she couldn't deny the spark she felt. The ache of loneliness that had followed her into the night had shifted into something else, something fragile but hopeful. Before she could gather her words, someone called Daniel's name from across the room. He turned, waved, then looked back at her with regret in his eyes. "I'll be right back," he said, rising from his chair. Emma watched him disappear into the crowd, her heart torn. She wanted to believe in this moment, to believe in him. But a voice inside reminded her of all the times she had been let down, all the promises that had crumbled. She pressed her hand against her chest, trying to steady her racing heart. For the rest of the evening, the question lingered. Was this just another illusion, or was Daniel's confession real? She didn't have the answer yet. All she knew was that when he looked at her on that dance floor, she didn't feel invisible anymore, and that thought terrified her as much as it thrilled her. The night wore on. The wedding hall, alive with music, chatter, and clinking glasses. Emma slipped outside onto the terrace, needing a break from the crowded room. Cool air brushed her skin, the scent of roses from the garden drifting up with the breeze. She leaned on the railing, staring out at the string lights twinkling in the distance. Her mind swirled with questions she couldn't shake. The dance had left her shaken. She hadn't planned to feel anything tonight. Not longing. Certainly not the warmth that had spread through her chest when Daniel held her close. She had promised herself she wouldn't let anyone close again so soon, not after Michael. Yet here she was, fighting the hope rising inside her. The sound of footsteps behind her made her turn. Daniel stepped onto the terrace, holding 2 glasses of sparkling water. His tie was loosened, his hair slightly out of place, but his eyes were steady as they found hers. He set the glasses on the railing and leaned beside her, giving her space. "I was hoping you'd be out here," he said quietly. Emma gave a small smile. "Needed some air?" "Me too." He paused, running a hand through his hair as if gathering courage. "I'm sorry if I pushed too much earlier." "I didn't mean to make you uncomfortable." She shook her head. "You didn't, I just wasn't expecting any of this." He looked at her then, his expression softer than before. Neither was I. Silence stretched between them, but it wasn't heavy. The noise from the wedding floated out faintly, but here on the terrace the world felt quieter, more fragile. Daniel picked up one of the glasses and handed it to her. 2 unexpected nights, he offered. She clinked her glass lightly against his. 2 unexpected nights. They sipped, the bubbles sharp on her tongue, and Emma found herself studying him in the soft light. He wasn't perfect. His suit was a little wrinkled, his movements a little restless, but there was honesty in his face, something she hadn't seen in a long time. Daniel set his glass down and turned to her, his voice lower now, more serious. "Emma, I know we just met. I know this started as a silly act to get my family off my back, but sitting with you tonight, talking to you, dancing with you, it didn't feel fake, not even for a second." Her chest tightened. She wanted to look away, but his words held her still. "I don't want to rush you," he continued. "I don't want to scare you, but I also don't want to leave tonight pretending this never happened. So I have to ask, can I see you again? Not as a favor, not as a pretend date. Just me and you?" Emma's heart raced. The question hung in the air, heavier than anything else he had said all night. She wanted to say yes, but fear rose like a wall inside her. What if he was just saying the right words? What if he left, like Michael had? Could she survive another disappointment? She looked at him, searching for cracks, for signs of insincerity. But all she found was patience. His eyes didn't rush her. They waited. Emma set her glass down beside his, her fingers trembling slightly. "Daniel, I'm not sure I'm ready," she admitted. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "I've been through things that made me doubt myself." "Doubt, love?" He nodded slowly. "I don't need you to be ready tonight. I just need to know if there's a chance. Because I don't want this to end at the edge of a wedding terrace." Her breath caught. No one had spoken to her like that in months. Maybe years. Honest, simple, without games. Emma's eyes filled with tears, but they weren't from sadness. They were from relief that someone saw her, not as broken or incomplete, but as someone worth waiting for. She let out a shaky laugh. You're not making this easy. Daniel smiled gently. It's not supposed to be easy. It's supposed to be real. For a long moment, she said nothing. She listened to the music drifting through the open doors, to the laughter of strangers celebrating love. Then she thought about the empty chair she had started the night with. How lonely it had felt, and how quickly Daniel had filled it not just with his presence, but with something she hadn't realized she was missing. Hope. Emma finally met his gaze, her voice steady this time. Okay, Daniel. Let's see where this goes. Relief washed over his face, his smile breaking wide. He didn't rush forward or pull her into his arms. He simply nodded, as though he understood the weight of her words. As though he knew this was more than agreement, it was trust. They stood there together, neither speaking.